Philip Pullman is one of the best-selling and best-known writers alive, best known for his dark materials. He's now written an unusual narrative. It's called The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ. It's reviewed for us this week by the great Christopher Hitchens, who's here to talk about it. Welcome, Christopher.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you're a big Pullman fan, but not necessarily of this particular book.
No, I like Pullman's fiction for its muscularity and unsentimentality and the way that it spoke to children in non-condescending terms about the extreme unlikelihood or undesirability, actually, of there being a supernatural dimension, a celestial dictatorship that we didn't have the power to change. In fact, his books end with finding some entity claiming to be God and putting it painlessly out of its misery. So that's pretty radical. And I thought praiseworthy for that reason. In his new novel, he does something that quite a lot of people have tried to do, which I regard as a soft option, which is to say, well, Christianity is fine, and Jesus was a wonderful person, but it's just that it's been perverted by the churches. It's organized religion we don't like. That's the usual bolt hole that people flee to, as you must have noticed. And I think that's a distinction without very much difference. Either there is a God who can make a human sacrifice out of his son. A very horrible thought when you think about it. I mean, God, the Old Testament God even stops Abraham from doing that. And that by some mysterious osmosis, this is redemptive, this torture death is redemptive for us, born long after it, who would have tried to stop it if we could. Either that's a moral tale or it is not. In my opinion, it's a very immoral tale.
In fact, you quote C.S. Lewis, of all people, saying to believe in the literal Jesus as he did is to accept him as a kind of lunatic.
Yes, I mentioned, I give about 2 or 3 citations. I mean, Thomas Jefferson took this view in his famous Jefferson Bible, which excises all the supernatural claims and just leaves you with the Sermon on the Mount and a few parables, and doesn't accept the divinity of Jesus, but says great teachings. Ernest Renan, in his Vie de Jésus, says much the same. C.S. Lewis, I think, is more honest when he says, look, this is a cop-out. If this man isn't the Son of God, then his teachings would be evil, because they tell you that the world is coming to an end, you should abandon your family, give no thought to thrift or investment or architecture or anything of the sort. It's all over. Come and follow me and throw aside everything else. If what you're saying isn't true, if you're just another ranter, another false messiah, then those preachings would obviously be immoral. You can't have the one without the other. They're only moral on the condition that he is the Son of God and was crucified, dead, and buried, and is coming back. If you don't believe that, the Bible is gibberish. I think that's the most honest thing C.S. Lewis ever said. But then that's not in a very strong field, of course.
Now, Pullman narratively has a device that he uses. Explain that.
Well, he postulates, which has been done before, I think the word Didymus actually means twin. And there is in some accounts, there was a Didymus disciple. At any rate, he allows the Virgin Mary, this is a perfectly good opening device, I think, to give birth to 2 boys. One of them rather nice, rather naive, rather concerned for others, perhaps a little bit simple-minded, and the other rather crafty and knowing. The nice one is Jesus and the nasty one is Christ. And Christ, in a slightly fratricidal way, tries to egg Jesus on to make more extreme statements and also keeps a private diary of his doings. And I'd be giving away the plot if I said much more, but I should perhaps go one more step. Well, he's approached by a mysterious stranger who appears to know his innermost thoughts and who speaks Greek, and who urges him, keep this record, because the record may be much more important than the life you're describing. In other words, he's encouraging him to already start writing down a myth that can later be sold to people, whatever happens. And so you have the Bible in a kind of parallel text, as condensed and related by Pullman in this way.
In your review, Christopher, you say that Pullman, to your surprise, ends up being a kind of Protestant atheist, I think is your term. What do you mean by that?
It's very clear that the church he's against, because it's said in a very long, heartfelt speech by one of the characters, is the Catholic Church. The church that claims direct apostolic succession from the Nazarene and whose leader, currently Joseph Ratzinger, is deemed to be the vicar of Christ on earth. So it's quite obvious that it's this continuity that he thinks is the most sinister one of all. And rather like a Lutheran reformer, he says, away with all this flummery, away with all this priestcraft, away with all this stained glass and incense and ostentatious wealth and the rest of it, but keep the essence of the thing, because that's beautiful. And that I would describe as a Protestant position.
Thanks a lot, Christopher.
My pleasure.
It's Christopher Hitchens, who this week reviews Philip Pullman's new book, The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ.